Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
My name is Nur Alisa Alimetia Muafiza.
My name is Nur Shaira binti
My
Kamnuddin.
name is Nur Nusratina Mika binti Zaki Shurmika.
My name is Nur Shafinas binti Mak Mazlan
from KAC 1105A.
from KAC 1105A, and we are from Group 1.
Group 1.
Group 1.
So today I will be starting the presentation regarding the Glomac's financial analysis. So firstly, let's briefly go through the background of the company. Glomac Berhad is an investment holding and property development company which was co-founded in 1988 by Tan Sri Datuk F.D. Mansor and Datuk Richard Fong. Glomac Berhad is located in Damansara, Kuala Lumpur and has been listed under Bursa Saham Malaysia since 2000. It is known to operate in three major sections, which are property development, construction projects, and also property investment. Moving on to the ratios, we are going to start with the liquidity ratio. Under liquidity ratio, we have two main components, which are current ratio and also quick ratio. Firstly, current ratio. As we can see, the current ratio of Glomac Berhad is 2.07 and the industry average is 2.78. The comment of the company's performance is the current ratio of the Glomac Berhad is lower than the industry average, which indicates unsatisfactory performance. So the lower the average means the liquidity position is also lower. This shows that Glomac Berhad has lower liquidity position compared to the average. What are the possible causes? Number one is too much inventory held on hand. So we can see from the total amount of closing inventory for the year ended 2018 and 2019. For the year ended 2018, the inventory was approximately 1.2 million, and for the year ended 2019, the closing inventory was approximately 1.1 million. So we can see there is the decrease in the amount of inventory, but we can see that the decrease is insignificant to the current ratio. Number two is because to the poor debt collection system. Okay, this can be proven by the ending balance of account receivable in 2018, which is approximately 4.2 million, compared to ending balance of year ended 2019 for account receivable is approximately 3.8 million. So we can also see that there is the decrease in the amount of account receivable from 2018 to 2019, but the decrease is still not enough to boost the company's ratio. And suggestion for improvement of the company's current ratio is Glomac can postpone any acquisition of capital that would entail or require any cash requirement or any cash payment. So we can use the cash to meet any short-term liabilities that are due. Number two, we can reduce the receivable collection period. So the faster Glomac can collect its receivable indicates stronger cash flow. It will also help to increase the current ratio. And the third suggested improvements is to resolve its payables slowly. Moving on to the quick ratio. So as we can see, the quick ratio of Glomac Berhad is the same as current ratio, which is 2.07 compared to the industry average of 1.72. Comment on the company's performance is the quick ratio is above the industry average, which is we can indicate that the company is more liquid than the average. So the company's current asset is not highly dependent on their inventories. That's why the quick ratio is higher than the industry average. The possible causes are due to current assets are not highly dependent on the inventories, meaning that they have a very efficient inventory control system. Some of these suggested solutions for improvements is number one, to improve its inventory turnover by forecasting future sales and demand so that the company does not have to hold too much inventory on hand. Number two is to adopt GIT system so that they won't have to hold inventory. Number three is to opt for clearance sales for inventory so that they can help to liquid inventories even faster. I think that is all from me. Thank you very much. I will pass the presentation to Nur Shaira.
Next is leverage ratio. Under leverage ratio, there are debt ratio, debt to equity, and also time interest earned. Okay. Based on the calculation above, as we can see, the debt ratio of Glomac Berhad is above the industry average. That indicates a poor performance. We also can see that the debt ratio of Glomac Berhad is 34.77, which is higher compared to the industry average of 18.04%. That indicates the company uses more debt to finance its asset. It also shows that the higher leverage implies a high financial risk of the company. The reason why debt ratio of the Glomac Berhad is higher the industry average or above the industry average is because the amount borrowed to finance its asset is high. So the company may borrow more than it's necessary, or they highly rely on external financing. So due to the higher debt ratio of Glomac Berhad, the company may issue new or additional shares to increase its cash flow. This is because it can be used to repay the existing liabilities as well as to reduce the debt burden. The company also can sell its asset and then list them back. It might be a help to induce a cash flow to be used to pay off some debt. On to the debt to equity ratio. For debt to equity ratio, as we can see, the debt to equity ratio of Glomac Berhad is 53.30% compared to its industry average of 68.88%. This shows that the company is using more equity in financing its asset, and it means that Glomac Berhad has not been aggressive in financing its growth with debt. The possible causes are that Glomac Berhad has a lower amount of financing their asset by funding through equity via shareholders. It means that the company is found to use less borrowing and more equity as their source of financing. But even though Glomac Berhad debt to equity ratio is below or under the industry average, the Glomac Berhad could consider optimum capital structure because it is the best mix of debt and equity financing. Moreover, it maximizes the company's market value while minimizing its cost of capital. That's all from me. I will pass the next presentation to Alisa Adlin.
Thank you, Shahira. Next is time interest earned. As we all know, the formula of time interest earned is profit before tax plus interest divided by interest. And according to our calculation, the leverage ratio for Glomac's time interest is 2.36 times, while for industry average is 2.14 times. By that, we can indicate that the interest received by Glomac Berhad is higher than other companies in its sectors, which also means that Glomac Berhad is able to satisfy its interest obligation. The possible causes that this could happen is because of the earning of Glomac Berhad are rising mainly due to lower purchase costs, in-payment charges, and higher operating profits. This also means that the company has sufficient earning to pay off interest expense and hence its debt obligation. And even though Glomac Berhad time interest earned is higher than the industry average, there's still a space for improvement. And by that, our suggestion is for the business to reach a high time interest received ratio, which means Glomac must earn more profit and lower its interest rate. This is because creditor will prefer a business with a much higher interest earned ratio because it indicates that when they are due, the business can afford to pay the interest payment. Next, I will pass this presentation to Shafinas.
Alright, thank you so much, Alisa. So without further ado, let's continue with the profitability ratio. Based on the calculation, Glomac Berhad had achieved 98.99%, while the industry average for the gross profit margin itself is 30.73%. As we can do the comparison between the industry average and the company, it shows that Glomac Berhad is higher compared to the industry average for the gross profit margin. So, by here, it indicates that Glomac Berhad is actually more profitable compared to the companies in the industry itself. It shows that in the year 2019, Glomac Berhad is very efficient in controlling its cost of goods sold. Okay, so as a proof, in the cost of goods sold itself, it only consists of the cost of completed properties sold and also the cost to obtain the contract. Okay, the cost of goods sold is actually lower due to probably cheaper source of good and also the low material cost used by the company. Okay, so the higher gross profit margin indicates that the company is having a sufficient sales volume due to the maybe higher quality offered for their products. So therefore, it shows that how Glomac Berhad can achieve a higher gross profit margin
So in order for Glomac Berhad to further maintain or improve its gross profit margin, the company has to review its pricing policy, meaning that it has to sell its product regularly with the reduction of the cost of goods sold. Okay, so some of the ways of how the Glomac Berhad can do this, can reduce the cost of goods sold, is by finding a cheaper raw materials, changing to a lower price supplier, and also using a labor saving technology to construct its project. So furthermore, the company also can improve the quality of its project by conducting a more routine inspection of all the rooms and furnishing, so that they can gain the client trust to buy the property, as well as make more investment in their future and upcoming project. Moving on is the second profitability ratio, which is operating profit margin. Okay, so as you can see here, this is how we calculate the operating profit margin for Glomac Berhad in the year 2019. Okay, so the operating profit margin for the company is 236.13%, and also the industry average is 22.32%. It shows that Glomac Berhad is actually excellent in the performance of the company. Okay, why I said so? This is because the operating profit margin of the company of 236.13% is actually higher than the industry average of 22.32%. So by here, it means that the company is making a higher operating profit compared to the companies in the industry of the property itself. Okay, alright, next is the possible cause. Okay, a higher operating profit margin actually could derive from a higher gross profit margin. Okay, for example, let's say the gross profit margin is high and the operating profit margin is higher. So by that, the company is actually showing very great in handling the operating expense. Okay, for example, in Glomac Berhad, it excels in reducing the cost of goods sold as well as maintaining the operating expense in a good health. To add on, they also had a great sales volume of 20.77962 million. So that is why the company is experiencing a great increase of operating profit margin compared to the industry average. Okay, for Glomac Berhad, how they could actually improve their operating profit margin is by reducing some of the unnecessary operating expense incurred by their company. For example, like high utility bills and also the unused subscription. Okay. Besides, the company also may review their selling price for their property project in the future. How the company may do so is Glomac Berhad could actually proceed with or maintain with the principle of spending on the local suppliers rather than getting the imports in developing a sustainable economy. Okay, for example, Glomac Berhad from the beginning, actually they're hiring the local suppliers for their development project in Malaysia. In Sarjana Perdana Township, okay, Glomac Berhad hired a local contractors to maintain the township security and rubbish collection. Okay, so by doing so, actually the company could reduce the operating expense, like for example the legal fees, rather than reducing the cost of goods sold too much, which actually may lead to a lower quality product offered by the company. So I'll be passing on to Alisa's bag for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Shafinas, for the explanation. Next, I will be explaining about net profit margin. The formula for net profit margin is net profit after tax divided by sales times with 100%. And for the profitability ratio of net profit margin, the total that we got is 111.44%, while for the industry average is 17.25%. By that comparison, we can say that the net profit margin ratio of Glomac Berhad is higher than the industry average. The difference of 94.19% from the industry average shows that Glomac Berhad has a very excellent performance. This is because Glomac has a successful cost control or a very solid pricing policy, which means they are able to turn more of its sales into profits. Improvement that we could suggest is for Glomac to review its pricing strategy and reduce distribution costs by changing the supplier, reduce labor costs, and waste of production. To talk about our next topic, Nusrati now will be explaining about return on asset.
Thank you to my friend. Okay, we will continue to return on asset. As you can see, the company performance compared to industry average, it shows that the company performance is unsatisfactory performance because the return on asset is under industry average, where the return on asset for Glomac Berhad is 1.94%, while industry average is 4.64%. Okay, it indicates inefficient in using asset to generate return to the ordinary shareholder. Okay, there are few possible costs that make the return on asset is under in the industry average, such as inefficient asset utilization, so that this made the company unable to generate income. Besides the accounting technique that used by the management, okay, return on asset is highly influenced by accounting policy. So this means that management can simply may manipulate the accounting policy to get the accounting result as they wish. Okay, the suggestion for the improvement for the return on asset control the business expenses. When the company receive more than it expend, it may expected that the return of asset to boost and even increase. Okay, the next suggestion for the improvement increase sales while lowering expenses. Okay, when the sale is increased, the number while the number of asset remain the same, it will make the asset turnover will increase. Okay, when the asset turnover increase, it can rise the return on asset. Okay, next we will see the performance for the return of equity. As you can see, the company show unsatisfactory performance for return on equity compared to industry average, because the return on equity is under industry average. As you can see, the return on equity for Glomac Berhad is 5.53%, while industry average is 8.68%. Okay, there are this indicates that the common stockholder earn low return for the investment. Okay, there are four possible causes that make the return on equity less than industry average, such as inefficient in generating return to their ordinary share. Besides, the management have made a poor decision on reinvesting capital in unproductive asset. Okay, there are a few suggestions for the improvement, such as we can changing one of those figure, either net income or shareholder equity. The equity can partially replaced by debt, as they have option in financing whether to finance using the debt or using the equity. Okay, next, the leverage ratio need to be handled with care, because the leverage ratio and return on equity are both effect to each other. Okay, next, increase profit margin will invariably raise return on equity as long as the shareholder equity remain the same. Okay, to enhance the profit of return, the company must balance the revenues growth and the cost of the management. Okay, how we want to do that? We may return the cost and increase the revenue, or we can reduce the cost and retain the revenue.
Last but not least is the common size ratio trend analysis for non-current asset and non-current liabilities. By the table, we can see that the property, plant and equipment, or we call it as PPE, decreased from 0.034% in 2018 to 0.007% in 2019. This is because there are no new acquisition of PPE, and depreciation expenses charged during the year decreased the amount of carrying value. Next is as for subsidiary companies. There's a slightly decrease by 0.38% from 44.83% in 2018 to 45.45% in 2019. While for the deferred tax asset, percentage decreased by 0.021% from 0.11% in 2018 to 0.089% in 2019. This is because the company had used the deferred tax asset in 2018 to pay the tax incurred in 2019. Lastly is the borrowing. Glomac's borrowing decreased by 2.41% from 10.89% in 2018 to 8.48% in 2019. Why? Because the company has paid their borrowings from the previous loan in 2000.
Okay. So, as the conclusion, Glomac Berhad have a good and healthy financial. So the Glomac Berhad is worth for people to make investment in the Glomac Berhad. So we also hope that the Glomac Berhad will improve its performance in future. So that's all for us. Thank you.